Now that free agency has started and most of the big names are gone, who do you think the Jaguars would like to pick at number 5? I'll talk about it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguar.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. It's your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcast. Whether you watch or listen, make sure you tap into that location each and every day so you do not miss an episode like today's episode, which is brought to you and sponsored by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Make sure you visit FanDuel.com and join in on the action, especially right now, man. It is March Madness. Tell you what else is madness. Madness is me and Jaguar fans, the ones that listen to Locked On Jaguars anyway. Love y'all to death. I didn't even do a poll this morning. I did something else, and it really was the outline for today's show. Third and final segment, we'll talk about the pressure that comes along with making these draft choices. I know me and others, we're armchair GMs all the time, but I have said a lot that this is a very, very difficult thing to do, especially when you're the one that's in charge of putting that card in and without explanation. You got to do it and allow the pick to stand on its own. I'll discuss that and more. What free agency means for the draft. James Gladstone spoke to the media yesterday, the new GM of the Jaguars, and he basically said they positioned themselves to really have a bunch of options where they're not tied into one position. They were able to address a lot of positions, and now they can truly focus on bringing in the best young player for the ecosystem. We're going to talk about that word in a minute too. At the top right now, we'll get started with Mason Graham. He's still on the fans' wish list. So it wasn't a poll, but about 80 to 85% of the people who I asked, and I'm going to tell you what I asked, just in case you're one of the people that did not see it, and I'm on a tongue-in-cheek, pop the Jaguar fans upside the head right now real quick. I asked, which player would you take right now after you've seen free agency? Only pick one. Don't sell it to me. I don't want an explanation. I want a name. 90% of the people did exactly what I asked. The rest of y'all, and I'm gonna joke with you now, so don't. I ain't naming names, so don't sit here and get a wedgie. But the rest of y'all couldn't follow instructions if they hit you right in the face. I didn't want to have to explain why I was doing it. Somebody said you should have done a poll, man, because they don't listen. I didn't want to do a poll either because that's multiple choice. So I'm still kind of semi-leaning towards pushing you towards 4 people. Maybe there's a name that I don't know, and somebody put Matthew Golden, and I didn't even get mad at him because Matthew Golden ain't going nowhere near the top 5, but I didn't even get angry at him because that's also the kind of stuff I wanted people to do. There were too many names because I don't know who's going to be picked in front of them, right? You never know. So there's too many names. I didn't want the name to be left out because then somebody would have done a write-in and that would have meant an explanation. The reason for this exercise is this. I was watching TV years ago, and this ties into segment 3. I was watching TV years ago, and there was a show. It was I think it might have been NFL Live or whatever, where Louis Riddick was there, Bill Polian was there, and Bill Polian, and there was another guest host, and Bill Polian asked Louis Riddick, okay, you got the card in your hand. What would you do? You got a card and a pencil, basically. And I'm going to paraphrase this. He said, what would you do? Riddick started explaining in only Louis Riddick's way, very well spoken. He got cut off. He said, nope, I don't want to hear that. What would you do? And then he started explaining again all of the options. He says, not what I asked you. Who are you taking? Then Riddick said the name. Polian said, okay. Now explain it. This is what I was trying to simulate. And I was trying to do this for a reason. Because one of the biggest things that Jaguar fans have talked about, and including myself, is the offensive line. But when put under pressure, and most people know that they've signed 3 offensive linemen, 2 of them are probably going to start, the other one won't. And a lot of people still sounding like Kendrick Lamar saying, it's not enough. Okay? 80% of the people said they'd take Mason Graham and they bypass offensive line in the top 5. Meaning they would get the pick of the litter of the offensive lineman in this draft, because I don't believe anybody's going before the Jaguars pick. If they do, it'll be New England taking Will Campbell. I wanted to pat y'all on the back and salute you guys, because what that means is, even though you know they still need more help on the offensive line, you realize that there may be a player or two that's better than the offensive lineman that the Jaguars could also use. And most of y'all probably would have been in favor of moving back into the first round or sitting there at 36 and taking an offensive lineman at 36. I'm also proud that most people did not choose an edge rusher, because everybody always talks about how you need more pass rush. There were 1 or 2 people that chose Abdul Carter, and I appreciate it. He ain't going to be there, but I do appreciate that. When under pressure, your subconscious told you what you should do. Your brain tells you, we need this and we need that and we need this. But that one thing that I've been trying to tell everybody is, it doesn't mean it has to be the first thing you address, even though it's the biggest priority. Y'all showed up and showed out. So I'm going to give you an attaboy. And I'm going to clap for you, because you still went and chose the dude that you think is the best player. You didn't give me an explanation that they didn't address it, and that it was the one thing that they needed, or one of the 2 or 3 things that they needed that did not address that in the 9 signings they've already had. You guys just organically just said, that's the guy I want. That's the guy I want. And it's that gut feeling that I believe GMs have to have on draft day, when they fall in love with a player because he fits so good. And even though they have other guys that are lined up right now to play that 3 technique spot, and that's where I think Mason Graham is going to play, unless you line him up and you 2 gap. And even with that, depending on what his weight is, he's not this big nose tackled Marcel Darius type. You shouldn't pick a guy like that unless it's Vita Vea. You shouldn't even pick a guy like that in the top 5 in a normal draft. No, not a run stuffer, not a guy that's like that, unless he doubles up as a dude that also gets pass rush. And I think a lot of people believe that's what Graham is. I know some people that don't believe that's what he is. Other folks chose Ted McMillan. Yeah, I know they signed Diami Brown, and I know we got BTJ, but guess what? Trevor needs more weapons. Salute to you if that's the way you feel. A lot of folks are just trying, and I think the second most people took is probably even between Ted and Travis Hunter. Either way, the Jaguars have a chance to really, really, really inject a big-time player. So what I want to do is we're gonna go over the pressure of all of this in the 3rd round, and I'm going to mention a scenario about Brian Thomas Jr. that will really let y'all know how hard this thing is for these people who have to make these picks. We'll do that, and we'll also go over what free agency means and look at the roster ourselves, and actually we're going to update what we believe are the most critical areas that they need on the team. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the net. You know those buzzer beaters are coming. You know those Cinderella stories are coming. It's going to be that one team that everybody's going to be rooting for. All right, this is what you do. Make sure you pick your favorites now. Pick who you think's going to win the game. And then you can let the magic work when it comes to by how many and whatever. Staying in on the action. Live betting is there for you to use just in case you miss a few minutes of the game. You can always be on an action all the way until the end of the game. and it's easy and it's fast and you get paid instantly. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action of March Madness. All tournament long, make sure you choose FanDuel. Moving along here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. Y'all passed the test because 85 to 90% of the people did exactly what I wanted them to do when I put that information out right before I was recording. So y'all passed. Y'all passed on the backs of everybody else. If you're one of those that didn't follow instructions, one of these days I'm gonna do a giveaway. I'm gonna get some money away to everybody except those that don't follow instructions, and then it's gonna hurt my heart because I know there's a lot of people I really, really like are going to be amongst those people that don't follow instructions. I did that because as 34 years in a barbershop, I have done that. Sometimes I just ask, I do the put up or shut up. All right, here you go. Here's your choice. Tell me right now what you do. Because in the barbershop, everybody knows how to do everything except the stuff that they're supposed to do on their own, right? Everybody knows everything. They know how to do everybody else's job. So I would always go, all right, forget this. No multiple choice. Tell me right now, if you were in charge of this, what would you do? And usually they just sit there and they get stuck, right? That's like not knowing not having a solution to all the stuff you're talking about. There are a lot of people that are just skeptics. They'll go against everything and they'll never tell you what they believe in, right? So that's why I wanted everybody to just spit that thing out and tell me what you believe. A lot of it is most of those people before free agency were they still chose the same person that they were going to choose. And if that's Mason Graham, it makes sense because the Jaguars didn't add anything on the defensive line at all. What free agency means to me is the best player that they signed is Jordan Lewis, followed very closely, in my opinion, by Patrick Makari. I think everyone that they signed, and I want to be very, very careful when I say this, everyone that they signed is an upgrade for the person. If you look at the depth chart of the Jaguars, every person that the Jaguars signed, if you were to take them and slot them in somewhere on that depth chart, whether it pushes somebody down or just totally replaces them, I think the player that they got is better than the player who was in that spot a year ago. So by default, that means they improved themselves. I don't think you need to go great player fishing in free agency because you always have to ask, why are they there? Especially if the team that had them has cap space. And teams that want to keep players will find a way to keep those players regardless of whether or not it's financially feasible or it's the best thing to do. You want them bad enough, you're going to keep them. Look at Kansas City. You see now why they got rid of the Jerry Sneed last year, because they felt like we'll be all right without him because we got things in development. But we ain't going to be all right if we let Trey Smith go. So they did everything they could to franchise him and probably going to sign him to a long-term deal. You ain't going to take our little 6th-round pick and that we developed and made him a great player, and then we're just going to let y'all come in here and swoop him up. No, that's not what we're going to do. So my point is teams that really want to keep players find a way to keep them. The Jaguars, I believe, with Eric Murray, that's an upgrade over Andre Cisco. And I know their goal wasn't just to be a slight upgrade over the departing player. Their goal was to find people that they believed that they could win with. The ecosystem. Ecosystem to me ain't nothing but another word for culture, right? In fact, I'm going to go ahead and look up the definition. Here we go again. We're going to look up the definition and we're going to apply it to football. The ecosystem, I'll just go with this one because the first one talks about a biological community of interacting organisms. We don't need to get all that technical on that. But in general use, it's a complex network of interconnected systems. Right? Sounds like a culture to me without using the word culture too much. I got one fear with Gladstone, and what that is this thing not work out as fast as people think, and they get sick of him saying ecosystem and tangibly rich. And I know Jaguar fans, that's exactly what's going to happen if things don't go right, or if a player that they pick isn't as good as a player that they could have picked. They're going to want to take those words and stuff them right down JG's mouth, because I have seen the way Jaguar fans get. They do it to me. They do it to everybody. Everybody was my buddy when I was trying to run Trent Baalke up out of here. And the second I started explaining away why James Gladstone was signing the guys that they signed, some people called me a shill for the GM. I ain't ever even met that dude. I've been the few times that they've had media sessions, I've either been suffering from something, waiting on surgery, or had surgery, and I've never put eyes on him in person. I ain't taking up for nobody. But the thing is we just have to recognize it for what it is. This is a hard job to do. Especially, it's really hard for people that's not in the building because they're making decisions and you don't know why they're doing it. So that's why I say what you do is you kind of sit back and you let them make their picks and let them make their selections. And then you put the puzzle together intellectually in your own mind to figure out, okay, why did they do this and why did they do that? So one of the things that I've drawn a conclusion from is I think when you look at the depth chart, everyone that they've signed is going to help in the spot where they're supposed to help. That kid that they got from Dallas, the offensive tackle, you know what I mean? Right now, I think he's better than Javon Foster, or whoever was backing up Anton Harrison at right tackle. And he has a bunch of starts. So this is also a situation where you're looking at a young fella who might push Anton Harrison into playing better. And that's Chuma Edoga. There's been a bunch of guys around the league in their third and fourth year. They figured it out and they finally get it. Ben Bartch re-signed with San Francisco. And he started for a lot in a lot of those games that they were winning. So what somebody else, like Mekhi Becton. Mekhi Becton was a starting right guard on a team that won the Super Bowl, but those lowly Jets felt like he wasn't good enough for them to keep him. And oh, by the way, Jeff Stoutland has done it again. He made a trade with Houston. Everybody talking about C.J. Gardner-Johnson going over to Houston. Yeah, that's fine, right? To replace Eric Murray, right? That's fine. But watch how Kenyon Green, a former first-round pick, when they put him in at right guard, watch what happens in Philadelphia. He's going to turn into the player that everybody thought he was coming out, but everybody thought he was coming out of Texas A&M. So most of this, too, is when you get players, you have to factor in that these are coaches and scouts that wanted those guys for a reason. You're not going to come out here in free agency and just continue to just get 9 starters to go on your team without paying a hefty amount of money. What it means for the draft is I think the Jaguars are primed to take the best player available. Now, I believe that they have multiple scenarios. I don't think in their mind, they may know exactly who that player is at number 5 if he's sitting there looking at him. But what happens is, and I'm asking you, what will happen if they get to that point and 3 of the guys they had at the top of their board, and it's very, very much a possibility that this could happen because I'll explain it. What if 3 of their top 4 players are available on their particular board? I think they may have an overall board, but their particular board for this team probably doesn't include either one of those quarterbacks, right? So if one of those quarterbacks goes, and maybe Abdul Carter might not be there too because they believe in their starters as edge rushers. He might be there because he's really, really good, right? And you can never have too many. But I guarantee you, if you just do a Jaguars board, how does that board stack up? I'll talk about what it means in terms of sitting and moving. Sitting and moving. We'll do that in just a second here. Third segment of Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder where did all the money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Surprising insights, all-in-one convenience, easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half your first year. All right, let's get to it. Third and final segment called Pressure. Here's the pressure that we have been trying to simulate, and here's some of the things that you might need to know that'll help you understand exactly what it is we were trying to accomplish here. Last year, the Jaguars picked Brian Thomas Jr. They moved back 2 or 3 slots, and he was still sitting there. I added on Good Report that the Miami Dolphins were torn between Chop Robinson and Brian Thomas Jr., and they chose Chop Robinson. My statement about that is, was it worth the risk? They got a 3rd and a 4th round pick. The extra 3rd and the extra 4th that they have this year, sure. With the new regime, more assets are always better. As good as he is, though, I don't think it was worth it. I think what they did was they got to a certain point. The Jaguars say, okay, we can move back 3 spots because there's like 5 guys that we could choose right now that we'd be happy with. And let's get some extra stuff. And if the wind blows us over here away from BTJ, that's what it is. We'll make do with somebody else. That would have been a nightmare. It would have really, really been a nightmare, man, to see that dude running around catching touchdown passes with someone else, and the Jaguars sitting here without a number 1 receiver saying coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? So the question is it always worth it? The question on the flip side of that is, what if the Jaguars were sitting at number 9 instead of Chicago and they took Brian Thomas Jr.? They would have took a beating so bad in the media from a whole bunch of people. I'm not one of them because everyone knows I was on record saying that I thought that kid was outstanding and he would be way better than people were giving him credit. But they would have took a beating for that. But that's a beating that they had to take. And then at some point during week 9, week 10, folks would have been like, all right, he's had enough. In fact, stop hitting him. In fact, clean him up. We're going to take him out and he's going to get an A5 Wagyu tomahawk steak because he actually did make the right decision. So, and that's the point that I'm trying to make and I'm trying to convey. The point is you don't know about draft picks. I think most of the time people get more upset when people don't take who they want them to take, as opposed to looking at the pick for what it is and saying, okay, I can understand that. Let's see if it works. Now, if it doesn't work, now we'll lambaste you with all kinds of name calling and everyone and everything else. Because the Jaguars don't want a quarterback, at least one guy, I believe most people consider Cam quarterback out of Miami. I believe most people consider Cam to be in their top 5. Outside of that, I don't believe most people have Shedeur there. It doesn't mean he would not be picked because the Giants need a long-term answer at quarterback. The Raiders are sitting there, and even though they got Geno, they may be a team in a couple of years. I don't think they should do it either. I don't think that he's going to get to him. Or if he does, I believe their team right now is set up that they're trying to win with Geno. And that happened because of Pete Carroll. I think before Pete Carroll, I think they were probably all in on Shedeur. I think when you get a mind like Pete Carroll in to go to work with Spy Tech, I think they're really, really going to make a pick in another direction. But let's just say the Jaguars sit there at 5. And if they have options to go back to 7 or 8 and still get their guy, is there one guy targeted, or do they have the flex in their program where they can understand if you take Mason Graham and then what we can do later, or if you erase that and he's gone? Because somebody asked me this a little while ago online. They said, well, what if the guy that they really, really target is gone? And this is the point that I'm making. There's different ways to go about it. You take Mason Graham now you're really looking at that next batch of offensive linemen and wide receivers, probably in round 2 or to a possible trade up into the back of the first round. And then there's another scenario. If it's not about just moving to the next position where you need, could it be going from Mason Graham? Could we move back and get his running buddy, right? Up there, the big kid, Grant. Sometimes that move back or sometimes that contingency action is at the same position and you drop down to the next guy that's a fit for you, or it's in another position. Or, and here we go, the Jaguars ecosystem. What if they have guys ranked a certain way because it's not about position, it's not about need, it's about we want whatever that guy brings to the table, we want that in our pot of gumbo. We want that injected into our program, injected that into our DNA, and we're going to let that guy just go. And we've seen that in free agency with Jordan Lewis. Where he played in the slot does not matter. Either him or Jarian are going to get a shot at outside first, from what I've been told. And what's going to happen here is he's just the guy that they wanted. Maybe not even the biggest need they have. Maybe because all the intangibles that you hear about him are things that they have. Those are qualities that you really want injected into your football team, especially in that secondary. And we've heard Anthony Campanile, the defensive coordinator, talk about stuff like that. So their list of people could look totally different from the list that we have intellectually in our head. And they're going to have to make a quick, fast decision. So that a lot of pressure goes along with that. A lot of pressure goes along with whether or not it needs to be explained or whether the pick can explain itself. How do you win with that combined with what you already have? All of these things are super, super, super important. That's why I did the exercise that I wanted to, because I wanted to take all of that stuff off the table, everything that everybody's been thinking. I didn't want anybody influenced by what somebody else says, and I don't want you to cast your vote because of something, and it could be misinformation. A person might be explaining that and have it totally wrong. And it might be a way that the Jaguars don't even think. That's the unknown about this entire process and the unknown about this entire thing. I tell you what, if they took Tet first and they wanted to go and touch the defensive line in the second round, I think there'll be a dude that it ain't that much worse than Mason Graham. If you flip it around and you go defensive line first, when you look at the top of that second round at those receivers, I don't think there's going to be a dude there that you can say that same thing about at wide receiver, even though I think there are a bunch of good wideouts. I don't. And then the offensive line, the elephant in the room. What do they do? Just because Patrick Makari has center experience, is he going to be in a battle with James Hainsey for that center spot? Is it two-man? Are they going to play Hainsey? Yesterday, James Gladstone said, hey, he's a starter in our interior offensive line. Didn't say where, didn't say right guard, didn't say center, didn't say left guard. I think that is contingent on what they do in the draft in day one or day two. That will tell you where that kid is going to play. Could Hainsey be paid the way he's paid, but he's an expensive backup, or he's the starter immediately, and then they draft somebody like Gray Zabel, and Zabel ends up after 4 or 5 weeks moving over and starting? Does that push him now into depth? He's not making a whole bunch of money, and because if Zabel is on a rookie contract, it would make sense and it'd be okay. It's like Gabe Davis makes more money than Brian Thomas Jr., but it doesn't matter because Brian Thomas Jr. is the alpha in that room. It could be the very same thing. One thing I will tell you about this, I am glad they got 3 new bodies on the offensive line, and I think each one of those guys is better than the guy that you could go on a depth chart from last year and pull out and extract and take away. So from that, I think they have gotten a lot better. It's going to be real interesting to see how they moving forward. If they sign any more free agents, they still have a boatload of cap space. If they start negotiating extensions for guys like Trayvon Walker, Travis Etienne, maybe. I don't know. I'm just throwing it. I'm not really throwing it out there. I'm just saying the people that are contributors on this team that could use a little bit of bump in cash and make sure that they stick around and they don't leave. We'll have to see how that works out. Make sure you tap in the Locked On NFL Draft and listen to Coach Keith Sanchez and Damian Parson. It is time, man, that you get the best analysis that you could absolutely get, and Locked On NFL Draft has that for you. Make sure you tap in along with Locked On NFL PM version. I'll be over there every day at 2:00 and here on Locked On Jaguars each and every day. Have a very beautiful weekend here in North Florida. It's like 75 degrees outside. you guys get some sun, drink some milk, and enjoy your weekend here in Jacksonville and get those mocks in and let me know how those things go on social media. Until the next time, you guys take care. We'll see you.